Thanks very much for inviting me. I appreciate it very much, and thanks for coming to listen. I want to warn you guys that this talk is a little weird. I mean, even on a relative scale, it's a little weird. And I want to explain that before I get started. So I got an email from Tom, right? Hey, you want to come give a talk? And I said, well, what do you want me to talk about? He said, well, whatever you want. That's perfect. I can talk about ecology and everybody's little face. It's great. I can talk about ideas. So I was planning on doing that. And then we exchanged a little bit more, email. And he says, well, what about, blue oaks? Why don't you get talk about your work on blue oaks? And I was thinking, that was before climate change actually started. I got an invitation. I want to be agreeable. I tackled it. I started building this talk about, what blue oaks. I taught us about ecology, and there's a lot. Blue oaks are amazing. Maybe not like Manzanita, but it's old. And anyway, so I worked at this. I started putting it all together, and like anti guys, I was just discouraged. I was thinking, this is just not very cutting edge. It just doesn't have the pizzazz. So what I did was, to get a little boost, some ideas, I went to that source of all innovation and all creativity in American science, the National Science Foundation. And I looked at there. I was actually meant to be 40. And I looked at what they want out of scientists. And the funny thing is it's not really that much science. What they want is integration and interdisciplinary kinds of stuff. So that's what I've done. I spent a lot of time talking to sociologists, and I have taken the different route sort of all together. And I've tried to frame my talk in this, interdisciplinary, integrated kind of approach. And to do so, I want to think about what, at least my favorite Californian species, Quercus dublasii, blue oak, has taught us about life. Not just ecology. I told you this. And so you guys, I haven't been in California really much since 1991. So pretty much everybody in this room knows more about blue oak than I do. But I'll still try to have fun. This guy's going through the endemic. It's a pretty tough species. It's a cool species. But one of the things that blue oak teaches us all, I think, this is an important thing to sociologists. I may be preaching to the choir, but it's okay to be a little bit up. And this is ecology. You don't care about this. Sociologists do. It's integrated. Now, sociologists look like this, right? Scleropolis, evergreen leaves. This is Mediterranean climate. Think about mayonnaise. But blue oak does this. Blue oak, it looks a little bit tough, but it's a winter deciduous thing. And to again steal a slide from Anna, this is what it does. As soon as the rain begins to taper off and it starts to get dry, puts its leaves up. Brilliant. And as soon as it begins to rain again, it drops its leaves. So it's kind of completely counterintuitive. There's nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with this at all. But I think it's nice to get a little bit of reassurance from nature. That it's okay. So here's the landscape again. Everything else is brown. Blue oak is doing its thing like crazy. Here it's wet. This is the grove. Blue oak. But anyway, an important lesson. Now, I don't have to watch for this next one. This is important, especially I think in this part of the world. You can also be sensitive. Okay? Again, a very important self-esteem thing when it comes to sociologists. We don't think about this much as ecology. Trust me, interdisciplinary stuff, this is where it's at. So, they're tough, right? They're all over California. They can get down. They can't do this kind of negative pre-knowledge. So, maybe -4 to -5. But as it turns out, dendrochronologists love blue oak because it's one of the most sensitive species that they know of in terms of year-to-year climate fluctuations. Another lesson. Another thing, this is a big deal to sociologists. We kind of assume this, but again, we're getting a little reassurance from nature. It matters who your kids' friends are, especially the blue oak, because they don't tend to have a lot of kids, at least a lot of kids that make it. And this has been kind of a big deal in California At least, in the 80s and 90s when I lived here, maybe it's not anymore. But reproduction in oak woodlands in general, actually it's kind of a weird global phenomenon. Oak woodlands are oaks tend to reproduce in either pulses, it seems like, or they reproduce so little that there's some concern about their longevity as a vegetation type. So here's a good example of blue oak standing without maybe really young trees. And if you look, this is a cartoon, I'll show you a real graph in just a minute. But if you look at a lot of kind of age distributions of blue oaks and other oaks, you see this kind of pattern a lot. A lot of old oaks in stands, not very many young oaks. So there's some old trees down there on the far end, and over here we see on the south, as you can see. So this kind of age distribution pattern is some cause for concern. And then here's some real data from the Hatchie Mountains. And again, you can kind of see this pattern. The main thing, you kind of zoom in on here. Because if you look down here, there's not been recruitment for a long time in this stand. Jim Griffin in this part of the world has argued similar things. Blue oak stands, the valley oak stands are not recruited very well. Well, yeah, I think that's true, at least from my perspective, 2 decades ago. But blue oaks grow in an incredibly complex matrix of vegetation, as we've heard from other talks, and even at a very small scale. And what I want to point out is that if you look for recruitment in areas that are dominated already by mature oaks or in grasslands in the savanna, you'll get that perspective. That recruitment is really, really low. But if you look at other places, as shown in this table, this is at Hastings, what you can see is blue oak is recruiting in places that you might not expect. So if you look at the left there, you see these really, really general classifications: grassland, blue oak, canopy, and then shrubs. And then you see the proportion of those groups in the next column. And then based upon the total number of seedlings or recruits, 257, that's how many I found, you can calculate what you'd expect from these proportions. And what you can see is shrubs made up about 40% of the area, but they had, the expected would have been 95 seedlings, but they have more than double that. So blue oak is recruiting pattern-wise in the shrubs, suggesting that maybe we're overlooking both a kind of a recruitment source in terms of facilitation and possibly misunderstanding sort of the dynamic sort of aspect over hundreds of years. And in experiments, sorry for the quality of this picture, this is kind of from film, in the 80s. This is a blue oak seedling that I planted as an acorn. It's growing underneath a salvia shrub. And it's part of an experiment, the lines are missing here, but it's part of an experiment that indicated that shrubs, very simply, almost certainly through shade, I'll show you that in the next slide, facilitated these blue oak seedlings in a way that was pretty important. So this is time down here, a couple of years. This is survival. And under shrubs, remember this, I planted these guys, about 60% survived over this period of time. Open grassland, everybody died. And if I remove the shrub, I'm asking, maybe it's the site thing, maybe it's anything to do with the shrub. Maybe it has to actually do with the site. No, it had to do with the shrub. When you took away the shrub, either salvia or Artemisia california, everybody died. Okay? And then in the following experiment, it seemed pretty clear that shade was a key aspect of this. So here's this is a completely different set of seedlings. Here they all died in the open grassland. And even with the cage, they all died. At least in this particular experiment. But if I had, again, that line is missing, but if I had a cage plus shade on top of the cage, they survived much like they did, like they did with the shrubs. So it indicated sort of a nurse plant-like thing, a facilitation-like thing, much like we were shown for saguaro cacti in the central desert. So, and it's not just any friend. This is actually, this graph, actually, these data were published Antonio and I, in Madronia. And what this graph, I'm cheating just a little bit because this is the blue oak. I don't have data for this, but kind of pretend. This is live oak, okay? So what you see here for live oak, this is survival over here, and this is under different shrubs. And again, I think this is about a 1 to 2 year period. And what's kind of cool about this is, and this really brings it home, Not only do you need a friend, you need your kids, your students, but it really depends on who it is. Nobody survived under Lewis. Very few survived under Minimalist. And under Eric and Mary and RPG, we have great survival in this restoration. So again, there's some species specificity here in facilitation. That's kind of cool. So, lesson number 3. This is a complicated lesson and it's hard to learn, but it's also really, really important. And I think it's probably true that you can take blue oaks and work. You know, you can do a lot of good stuff. You can do a little bit of bad stuff. I got a joke about McGregor. I can tell you all later. You can just a little bit of bad stuff, and that's what you remember for. Okay? That's your legacy. Doing a lot of good stuff. Really make up for too much bad stuff. Okay, so this is going to be complicated, so you have to follow me a little bit closer. But blue oak is a really intriguing thing because at least some of them have a big facilitative, not just the perceiving is good facilitative, but when they get rolled out, some of them are very good facilitators of that primary productivity of their canopies. And actually, probably you guys are familiar with the story. If you go back into the 50s, maybe the 40s, 60s, the opposite was argued for blue oak. And a lot of blue oak woodlands were removed to improve rangeland and productivity for cattle. Keep that in mind because it's actually an intriguing little part of the story that I won't really get to at least explicitly. So at least there are oaks that do this. You know, the productivity underneath the other story of some of these big guys is much higher, maybe 2 to 3 times higher than that. And it's probably due to shade to some degree. I'll show you a graph in a minute. And it's probably due, or almost certainly due, to soil fertility to a large degree. I'll show you this in the next slide. Generally through years of through fall, through these lichens and leaves, or simply dropping litter on the ground, blue oaks dramatically change their habitat for other species, and in turn increases NPP. So here's a paper by Ragan from 2003. It's presented a little counterintuitively, but this is depth here. This is precipitation, potassium and nitrate. Horizon's A, down to B, and this is the amount down here in the x-axis. A little bit odd, how we normally see it. Here, right here is grassland. Okay, this right here is what the amounts that you see at these different levels underneath blue oak canopies. So blue oak canopies are really enriching the soil for potassium and for nitrogen. Again, here's the depth chart, open grassland, and here's oak canopies over here. So especially at the surface, where you see these big effects of through fall and the litter fall, blue oaks fertilizing. So these guys who wanted to remove blue oak, and wait, we're kind of right. When they removed blue oak, they got a pulse of increase in growth. It went away. So anyway, facilitator, it adds a lot of nutrients to the soil, not just the 2 that I showed you. But there's a weird thing. A lot of blue oaks do this. This is just terrible underneath here from a ranger perspective. This is very low productivity. This is why blue oaks were removed. And so it indicates that blue oaks can do some good things and do some bad things. And how they balance out in sort of a net interaction or a net effect is a really intriguing both ecological and the point I'm trying to make, a sociological thing. So here's the pattern that I'm going to explore in the next few slides. And again, this picture is just off of the internet, but where I explored this was at Hastings. And at Hastings, you can see the pattern that I'm kind of presenting here in sort of a cartoon fashion. So here's the highest productivity you can find under some trees, like I showed you in the previous slide, or blue oaks are facilitators. You can go just a few meters away, and you can find blue oaks that really seem to suppress the productivity of grasslands, in which you're almost walking on bare ground and litter. And it's not entirely clear why that would be. So again, the pattern, some seem to facilitate, some seem to be inhibitory, and some, relative to the open grasslands. So open grasslands, some are good, some are bad. That's the pattern. Sort of scratching my head over. Here's a good example. That's about 100 kilogram boy in that picture. These are these, I want to call them negative oaks. They're negative. Okay, low productivity underneath here. Look out behind here. That's pretty good back there. And then here's the same boy. And here's an example of one of these kind of higher productivity. And again, higher than in the oak and lower than in the oak. So, again, I'm going to kind of talk about these two classes of trees, and I put this slide in here so I wouldn't forget to say something tree important. And that is, I'm not trying to say that blue oaks sort of are all positive or all negative. I'm not trying to say that. That little funny graph up there is to remind me not to get in trouble. I think probably most blue oaks out there on the landscape are doing something like this. Then you got these special guys that are out here, kind of small. So this is where you can see my guess, my wild guess. This is that the negative to positive continuum. I would guess it's probably most right here. You get some of these big boys like this that really show this facilitated effect. I'm not trying to Anyway, negative and positive, do that just for kind of a heuristic kind of tool, trying to understand what might be going on. So here's the pattern. Here's productivity. Okay. This is what you see, and again, this is just the setup. This is positive trees, negative trees, the opens in the middle. And that pattern identified over a number of different years for a suite of trees. So when I started looking for little patterns that kind of mirrored this, that would give us some kind of correlative idea of why we might see this weird apparent facilitation and then apparent suppression or competition. So of course I thought about nutrients because there's been a lot of papers going back to D.L. Holland and his students indicating that oaks fertilize the ground. So the hypothesis would be, well, these positive oaks fertilize the ground. The negative oaks, they don't. They suck it up. They take stuff out, because they're negative. Okay, relative to the oak. Well, I didn't find that. And that's kind of a key part of my little story here about doing good things and doing bad things. Okay, all these oaks are fertilizing the ground, which is exactly why these folks have chained oaks down to flush. Okay, because over long periods of time, over decades, their bulk fruit all fertilize the ground. Okay, so this is a negative, a positive. That's a negative, and that's the oak. That doesn't fit that pattern. Neither is phosphorus, neither is honey. Potassium, just like Dalbert. Calcium, so we see this big fertility effect, among other things, but it doesn't fit this pattern of good oaks and bad oaks. Okay? So they're all being good in this respect. And a matter of fact, if you take the soil, take the greenhouse, excellent greenhouse in Santa Barbara, here's the pattern. It didn't fit either. Woodland, you take soil from woodland, blue oak stuff, it's all good. It's all facilitated. Same thing for oaks and Centennial. You put those together, it doesn't really matter. Bottom line is that both oaks, even the ones looked at, are being good. They're all doing something to facilitate the soil. Same thing for shade. It's hard to detect much facilitated out of this. But the main thing I want to point out is that it's a pursuit of full sunlight. This is time down here. The oaks cast the same amount of shade. So whatever good they're doing through the shade, both being good. Okay? So it doesn't seem to be any difference. What about water? Well, I measure water a lot too. This is soil moisture underneath all my oaks. Got it in the open grassland, got it under these so-called negative trees, and got it under these positive trees. Now here, we do see, so the negative trees are that symbol right here, okay, and right here. So as the summer dries out, our classic Mediterranean summer, negative oaks suck water out of the soil. Okay, and that's not clear that that's what's doing the competition thing. It could be. Okay, it could be this. Because the grasses are growing here. Oaks are leaving out, and this water pattern was after the grasses were dead. So it doesn't mean it doesn't happen in some years, but it doesn't quite fit the pattern of this kind of being bad and being good. So this could be the difference between the negative oaks here and the positive oaks here. So anyway, I'll tell you what I think the main difference is. I think it's plasticity in the root architecture. Because this is not by accident. Basically collecting soils for the nutrient analysis. It was clear to me that digging under my so-called chosen negative oaks, it was really hard to dig. It's hard to collect the soils. And it's because of roots. So I thought, I should collect roots. So I did. And these are the different categories here. This is depth. So the shallow, deep, fine root biomass. In other words, I think about 2 millimeters. And these gray bars, this is a mound over here. These gray bars are these so-called negative trees, and these black bars are these so-called positive trees. And now we're seeing something that's kind of cool. And it could relate to that water graph that I just showed you. So here there's way more roots in the surface underneath these so-called native trees. The trees that don't have any grass underneath, the trees that are ultimately needing that and not being good. Now remember, all of these trees fertilize the soil. All of the soil shows a facilitative mechanism at work. But they don't all show the same plasticity. At least I'm assuming it's plasticity. Don't know that for sure. So the graph sort of like tennis, not as cool, but it certainly shows the difference between these groups. This is Predon's island pressure potential over here. All Ferguson glaciae. These are these so-called positive oaks. They're not very water stressed, and so-called negative oaks are very water stressed. So tough. Okay, and again, this is over this dry down Mediterranean summer. And this indicates something special. I'm trying to go backwards to get this out here. Yes, it fits with this pattern, right? So maybe these guys here, these are the ones experiencing the water stress. Maybe those guys are dependent on surface rainfall. For whatever reason, they're not able to get down to tap groundwater. And these guys are dependent on surface rainfall, and their plastic response in root architecture brings them into contact with the roots of the grasses. Okay, anyway, this indicates these guys are tapping into some semi-permanent source of water, and that these guys are not. And it does kind of fit. Back in the 60s, there was work done with sort of trying to trace where blue oaks got their water, and at least some were able to get water from the ballpark from 100 feet. So at least very, very deep. They can be very, very deep. Well, this suggests that some are, some aren't. Okay, so here's my kind of my pet hypothesis for this. These are these so-called positives, so-called negative trees. Okay, there's a few things that are easy to measure. These guys are not very water stressed. Okay, got it. These guys have a lot of grass underneath. Jack, we can measure that. Few roots, measure that. Okay, the reason why there's few roots here is because they're tapping the water. At least that's been a working hypothesis for 22 years. So, and over here, there's not much grass. There's a lot of roots at the surface here. And these guys are water stressed. So it would, again, suggest that sort of plasticity root architecture is very important to how they express their goodness or their badness. But what's left on the picture right now are the fiddles. What are these roots doing? Is there any evidence that these roots are a player in the game? The tree roots, the oak roots. So they did an experiment with low-fired clay pots here. My attempt was to let some water go across the surface into low-firing, but not roots. It was kind of dumb. PVC worked just as well. And so anyway, I did one experiment with these guys and one experiment with PVC. And found pretty much the same thing. And all I'm going to do is show you a picture. But again, the idea here is to let some grasses grow in here without coming into contact with the oak roots. That's it. Okay, I did it under positive trees and under negative trees. But I'm only going to show you this picture because it's the important thing. This is under the same tree. It's a negative tree, bad one. And this is, these are 5 experimentally planted bromus diandrus. It's still called bromus diandrus. Everything here has changed. It's not perfect. So anyway, this is no pot. And these guys don't look very good. Tiny. Okay? This over here, right under the same tree, has a pot. That pot, not that pot. Just like that. In here. And then the grass is big and produce big seeds. This is just one of the coolest experiments I've ever seen in outdoor. Pictures. So these guys are giant, these guys are small, and it does implicate these surface roots. This did not happen under the positive trees, only the negative trees. So, one kind of cool thing about that is it does implicate the product of this root plasticity in the interaction result. So, back to this, you can do a lot of good, a little bad, kind of override it all kind of thing. So here's our positive trees, negative trees, they're both doing. They're doing good things, being facilitated. But over here, you don't have a really, it's very little negative. They're just mostly good, just almost exclusively good. We're over here, bad, and just overrides, and you don't even get to see the good in their lives. And I think that is an important message too in our integrated way to look at ecology and sociology. Okay, one more vignette, and I'll quit and answer the questions. This is the last thing, and this is an important take-home too. Even when you're nice, and none of this is my word. It comes out of Kevin Rice's lab. Even when you're nice, it doesn't always pay off. You just gotta suck it up. Be nice just for nice's sake. Okay? So we talked about this facilitative effect, and Blue Oak does have a strong facilitative effect. Again, it actually changes the plant communities quite a bit, but I haven't been wanting to look at that. Increases productivity, and it really promotes, at least where this grass is found, it promotes a couple of broma species. At least when I was there, actually I have been back to Hastings and I've seen some pretty substantial changes in the species that are on the ground. I see a lot more, was it stipa or Nacella? It's back to stipa. Stipa Nacella. It's a lot more. People there told me that was crazy, but I said, I haven't been here 20 years. I know about it. You guys see it change slowly. So anyway, this facilitative effect, one of the main beneficiaries of this is an exotic, actually a few exotics. In my measurements, Bromus diandrus and Bromus mollis, two exotic animals, mainly Bromus diandrus. That's Bromus diandrus. That's beautiful. And so this plant really benefited from this fertilization effect. And there's actually some really cool studies done by Kevin Rice's group comparing how this shifts competition in and across the board. Really neat stuff. But one of the main things that they found is that this very plant, this very species that Quercus douglasii was nice to and that facilitated it was held in return. And so here's soil water potential here. This is very negative. This is dry. That's pretty wet. This is pre-dawn xylem pressure potential for oak seed, blue oak seed. And so, and these blue dots over here, well, that's Bromus. That's Bromus diandrus. Just sucking all the water. It's hard to believe, minus 60s. But just sucking all the water out of the soil, and in turn creating low water potentials for the oak seedlings. So, not fair. Bromus diandrus benefits, and this is actually a pattern that we see a lot in facilitative interactions, in which, same thing with the desert, in which the beneficiaries of the facilitative effect often turn into very strong competitors with their inverse effect. So, one more slide that we got here. So this is the same sort of deal. So this is blue oak seedling conductance. This is drying down, over the course of summer, conductance, transpiration. What we have here, this is a live transpiration, so no annuals. Blue oak seedlings are transpiring very, very well. Who they do, the ones that do almost the worst with are these guys right down here. Bromus species, Bromus diandrus, and Bromus mollis. Suppress the transpiration capabilities of the seedlings. Okay. That's my little ecology, sociology run. It's okay to be a bit odd. You can be tough, but you can also be good. Okay? It matters who your friends are, your kids' friends are. Doing some things does not make up for doing bad things. And it doesn't always pay off in life. That's the way it is. Thank you very much. I think that the pots, and again, I did it twice. Two second times, which is the two for PVC. So water could drain and just kind of block tree roots from touching and getting into the same rises as the grass roots. And so whenever I did that, again, who knows what else I did experimentally that compounds, but at least it's consistent with the way they do it. That if you keep tree roots, blue oak roots, away from the grass roots, that's under the negative tree, and only. So my argument there is that this is consistent with competitive trees, the negative trees, their roots. No, I hardly even knew what a microorganism was. Actually, in my lab now, we do a lot of work with exotic bases and soil. So in hindsight, yeah. I mean, but even this work I've done, the blue oak grass in the lab, I can't immediately bring something to mind. But as I was doing sort of this background thinking and trying to catch up with all really old examples, there's been an awful lot of cool work done in this. I just can't think of that.
What would be better if we have a competitor to blue oak and have a lot of surface hybrids that goes down in cactus?
Well, but I mean, I think that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. I think blue oak, if I understand your question, I think the deal is that it's just simply not necessary to invest in a huge amount of surface roots if you're getting this, but yes, if you're getting a lot of water from 60 feet down. So you're not investing in that. Instead, you're investing in doing above ground, you're doing whatever else you want to do with the park. So in other words, it's not a matter of avoiding or anything, it just happens to bring you into conflict or not. Did I answer your question? I don't think the grass has anything to do, but anything to do with plasticity of the earth.
I just thought it was surprising to see more like cactus than where the vineyard negative oaks.
They all have heavy, big, taproot kinds of stuff. It's not like they're, yeah. It's just all I know is that there's differences in the amount of little fine roots in this surface soil. When you run into huge roots, under roots, all of it. I'm just assuming from the water potential that those positive ones are getting deeper, or at least run into some good stuff. That's all. And I don't know what I think.
Have you thought of doing any stable isotope work to test your hypothesis about different rooting depths?
So where they're getting their water, that would be a great idea, but why haven't you done that? That's a great idea, actually. Yeah, because I would guess it would be. Go ahead. What do you think?
Ray, when there are cattle present, you see them camping under isolated oaks. Do you think there may be legacy effects from that kind of activity?
Yeah, there certainly could be. In other words, some livestock using one and not another certainly happens with other trees. And it could be a legacy effect over time at Hastings as well. It's just been a long time. So I chose Hastings intentionally because at least it's been a while. But it's possible that those legacy effects are there. Although, again, remember the fertilization effects are everywhere. So I think that was done before me, more than once, after me, more than once. So I think that fertilization effect, through just altering the nutrient cycling, is pretty sound all over the place.
Yeah, I'm just wondering a little bit about the genesis of the formation between what's called positive and negative fluid. Is there some threshold that's passed, say, a deeper water table that requires some cappings, or is it just completely random that it's a seedling or saplings or a fibrous root system?
No, that's a great question. I think it's plasticity for really only one reason, and it's not the best one. So it certainly could be that we're actually looking at genetic differences, right? The hybrid or something like that. But I feel like the leaves and acorns. And actually, I had some lysozyme work done in some lab somewhere. They didn't show any differences. But Kevin Nixon was an oak taxonomy guy. Visited while I was a graduate student at UC Santa Barbara, and I took one of the labs, and I took the acorns that I could get and leaves from all my trees and put them out and like a test for him. And he was on his job. I asked him if he would, my time with him, he could talk to the visitors and all that. It was like, we're going to talk over a little cafeteria test here. I want you to tell me who put these guys in the classes, and he couldn't. His argument was these are all good, solid. But that's anecdotal, right? So you can be right. I mean, there could. I think it's a luck thing. I think it's maybe an age thing. And give some things enough time. The next 100 years, maybe they'll happen. That's me being speculative. I don't know. All I can tell you is what I measured the differences.
The good guys and the negative guys. Were the negative guys generally clumped? bigger
Yeah.
guys,
No.
generally bigger and more alone.
Not always, but yeah, so that's why I looked at savannas and woodlands. Yeah, there can be a lot of site things that I try to avoid. In other words, I try to put them right next to one another. Okay, and then what I have is this correlative evidence that they're doing something different, probably plasticity. So in general, yeah, and valley bottom, you see a little bit. You can see it's easier to find a positive. So there is, I think, measure, intentionally try to mix them all up in these stands and tasting for that very reason, because I knew it excludes that.
There wasn't a trend.
I think there is a trend, but I don't think it's overwhelming. I don't think it's fully expensive. Yeah, I do think there is a trend, as you described.
You're seeing long-term hope for Blue Oak Woodlands.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I live in Canada. I mean, are we still staying substantially compliant? Are they relatively well protected now?
No decline.
No decline?
Decline.
I don't know. I actually don't know. In terms of improvement and regeneration, my hunch is because oaks do it all over the place. I mean, all kinds of oak species show that pattern of pulse recruitment. I would bet there's something like this. Although who knows? I forget what's Dave, you were talking about threshold. Or maybe looking at a threshold sort of thing where you disturbance, has you be kind of transition to any I don't know. Threshold.
What should land managers do who are responsible for blue oak stands?
I'm kind of an old-fashioned conservationist. I mean, I actually think one of the best ways to deal with preserving blue oak stands would be to